Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the best damn social club in the universe, the 42 Social Club. I am your host, Jedi ASU, and happy Thursday. Welcome to um, another quick burst on a late Thursday night. Just going to go ahead and chat about um, what's going on in the world, especially in the world of sports. Nam is with me here again, and so we're going to jump into that. So, as always, make sure you get yourself a drink, sit back, relax. Let's get social. Nam, welcome back. How have you been, man?
Well, I mean, you literally just saw me a week ago, so not that much has changed. We have gotten into the first week of distance learning. So, continuing to work from home, getting to know my kids. I'm really lucky that the rhythm of life for me is stable and happy. And, my girlfriend is the only person that I have seen for basically months. And,
Right.
she still hasn't tried to strangle me in my sleep yet. So I consider myself a lucky man.
Well, I think you're what, in a one bed apartment, so at least you guys can separate by you sleeping on the couch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is a classic move as well. So that's always a way to go. But no, I thank you again for joining. I know we're turning this into a weekly thing, but I know you and I were talking about the state of um the world relative to sports, especially here in the U.S. And I know we are talking about that, especially given the news that happened out with the NBA, and LeBron James kind of leading that charge. But I think everyone was kind of looking to make it. Actually, it wasn't even LeBron James. I believe it was the Milwaukee Bucks that led that
Yep.
charge, right?
Yep.
And so they're still definitely pushing for a lot as well. But it's just definitely so many things happening at once, if you will.
Yeah. Originally, when you and I were on last week, we were talking about aliens and ghosts and like human existence. And we had originally planned that, hey, this week we'll either talk about Star Wars or dystopian movies. And,
Right.
when the news breaks last night and it becomes apparent that maybe we don't have enough time to like rewatch movies and like this is the maybe the most pressing topic, right, that's going on
Right.
uh, like in the sporting world that's relevant to both of us. I felt like people are well aware of everything else that's going on, but this is an area that I think you and I can really just like explore together over the next hour. So I thought that that was the way to go.
Absolutely. And that's kind of one of the things that I was kind of thinking about that I'm still trying to reconcile in my brain. And one of the things was is that it's what do we got? Oh, hold on. Breaking news, I think. Sorry, I didn't want to do this, but I think this is important.
You have like 9 monitors. I've seen your setup.
Yeah. I believe Coach Lute Olson just passed away. So shout out to Coach Olson and his family. I was actually there. He came to Tucson probably in about the early 80s. So I kind of saw his rise all the way from a coach from Iowa and turning Arizona into a national powerhouse. So um, met him once briefly. Um, Always gracious. And so despite the rivalry between us, it's definitely someone he definitely deserves all the honor on there. So I'm not exactly sure which Stanford coach would pass away that you would have to, give honor to, but I know that's definitely one of those that, you know, I'd have
Yeah,
to
that's
recognize her in the show.
legendary, just college basketball coach, presided over several Final Four runs. You know, thoughts and prayers and best wishes out to his family. On the Stanford side, I guess I've always been a little bit fond of Mike Montgomery. He's
Yep.
like Bay Area type. Other than that, though, my like interaction with the Cal Stanford rivalry hasn't really been substantial for most of my life. Like
Okay.
USC is my number one, like with a bullet, like the team that I
Interesting.
pray to defeat every year. Well, that's just what happens when you're a kid and you lose 13 straight, right? At one point, it became over half of my life before we
Right.
had beat USC. But, lately Stanford is climbing my dislike rankings. And I know that this is maybe like outside of the scope that what we plan to talk about, but like their recent like Title IX revision around
Hmm.
sexual assault is just like really disgusting. And I know that some people have called Stanford like the Harvard of the West, which isn't ill-fitting. It's an institution of privilege. It's an institution of legacy, and just as bland and flavorless and lifeless as my visit over to Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I don't think it's inept.
Right. Exactly. No, that's and that's yeah. It's a shame that we get to do that, but no, I remember What years did he coach? Anyway, it's separate, but yes, it's But anyway, that was breaking news. That's unfortunate, and hopefully he is doing. Hopefully, all the best to their family. Although his wife, Bobby, she passed, I think, in the early 2000s from cancer. So um, they are reunited in a way. So, um, yeah, back to the NBA. It was my question that I was going to ask before the news happened. Um, NBA did not play last night, and they did not play tonight, but they are resuming tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's tomorrow or like within the next couple of days at the latest.
Okay, because it was just kind of it wasn't sitting well with me that there was only a 1 day protest, and so I don't know if that's just I want it. I don't. Again, I don't know I don't know if something's wrong with me or if I'm just looking at it differently, or maybe I'm looking at it wrong. It's just I don't know. Does it really? Does a few day putting a halt this many days? I think this many days helps rather than it just being 1 day.
Yeah. Uh, Definitely. So I think the latest news that we've received is that they are planning to resume the playoffs, which
Hmm.
was always my expectation. Once you run the numbers and know that if we don't finish this basketball season, you're talking about potentially blowing up the entire structure of pro basketball, which you hope, or maybe that's too strong of a word, but
Right.
that, if guys were really willing to go to be that radical and that progressive and that strong, which again shouldn't fall. I want to mention that right away. It's like it should not fall on our athletes to take the biggest risks and the biggest steps in this fight to like end police brutality and to start reform of law enforcement and things of that nature. Um, you know, like I guess that was always a pipe dream to expect that they would leave the bubble and like that kind of thing. But what I'm expecting is that once the details are finalized about like what concessions and what additional steps that they're able to extract from the owners, that's not nothing either.
Right.
You've seen kind of the discourse trickle down to other sports also.
Hmm.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that the WNBA has been an excellent and consistent leader of these things. That they have been consistently throughout this process been loud about this.
Hmm.
And I think that what motivated a lot of the basketball players last night was one, I mean, it happened in Wisconsin, right? Like right in Giannis Antetokounmpo's like backyard, and
Right.
the rest of the Milwaukee Bucks. Um, and we have to accept that that's still big, and the players recognize now how much power that they have. Uh, and we'll see what transpires going forward and what concrete steps that we're able to actually uh, see the owners put on the table. But I'm willing to bet that it's not nothing if they agreed to come back to play.
No, exactly. I think that was one of and I think it's a several series of back and forth that had to happen, right? And it's interesting because it's completely different from everything else, right? Because people have been calling it a strike rather than something else, and so it's not for. And it's interesting because it's not the last strike the NBA had, I believe, was for the player association versus the owners. Now it's
Mm,
something that's a lot more social, right? It's not unto themselves. It's always, and again, I think there were some baseball teams that decided not to play. I think there were some. I don't know if did the entire NHL not play today, or I wasn't sure.
I think after after last night and generally proceeding forward, the NHL took a beating across the media landscape. And
Mm.
so they kind of peeled back a little bit tonight. I from what I've seen that's trickled across my timeline, the league has kind of like recognized that they are. I mean, the racial dynamics there are also very different,
Right.
right? Like you have a very small black player population,
Hmm.
and those black players consistently report, racial abuse, insensitivity, from their fan base. So it's like it's one of the most conservative sports. I would argue that maybe it's even to the right of the NFL, because the NFL does have a very strong social justice streak through it from their fan base, from the some of the media that covers it. But it is encouraging in some
Hmm.
ways. We've seen something that we haven't seen in a long time. Just players willing to go beyond just, okay, I wore a shirt,
Right.
which is not nothing, but that's usually about as risky as most players are willing to be. I wore a shirt, I performed a gesture, because they're putting a lot on the line there already. And it
Right.
really shouldn't fall on them. It shouldn't be their responsibility.
No, and I think that's very interesting because whose responsibility would it be, right? Because I think, like I said, they're the ones that are able to leverage. Who was it? Someone was saying that they're able to leverage their what is the word? Leverage their who they are as a and leverage that as a platform. I don't know if it was Bill Russell or someone else that said it, right? But leveraging
Mhm.
themselves as the platform, right? Because I think they are the only ones that are able to, right, be able to speak up because yes, the protests are going on and yes, there's a lot of unrest and people are speaking out, but you don't unfortunately see as much change as you possibly want. So I don't know if it just really comes down to okay, does it really mean that you need someone more visible like athletes at the professional level? Or is it really truly something where it comes down to an athlete is actually just going to have to become a politician and then really start in or, enacting change that way? That's where I'm kind of like trying to figure out what's next.
So, so I have some thoughts. I wouldn't say that I have it like fully formed yet, right? But if we think about it like this, um, you know, I don't, I've never lived in another country, so I can't say for sure. But like at
Same.
least here in America, um, sports is so wrapped up with the day to day like rhythm of our lives, right? We go to
Hmm.
work, we come home. There is usually some sort of sporting entertainment
Right.
on, right? And I talk to my students a lot about like what is real effective protest,
Hmm.
right? Protest, by definition, I think if you want it to be impactful, cannot be sanctioned by the powers that be, you know?
Mm,
Um, Protest has to couch itself in a demand, right? It has to be something that challenges the status quo. And so the ways in which players have done that recently, kneeling, right? Like
mhm,
symbolic gestures that take place before the game,
right.
um, their own private platforms, which can theoretically be ignored to some degree,
Mhm,
which because it lacks visibility if you're not necessarily looking for it.
right.
And, you know, our players so far across the league, across the NBA, college football, and what have you, like, I think that they saw that simply speaking out, right? And they're seeing the limits of what's possible just by doing that.
Right.
And it's not nothing, but there is a hard limit to what they're able to do as long as the machinery of sports continues to lurch forward.
Mhm.
So, I think that LeBron, Giannis, and them like wished that it wouldn't come to this, that they didn't have to
Of
sit out
course.
and threaten these things. But maybe at some point, it's like the only way that we can get America to really reckon with what they're facing is to no longer consent, for black athletes to no longer consent to just being viewed as entertainment.
Right. That's interesting you do and again, you are truly viewed as entertainment, right? You are someone on a screen. You're someone that I see for 2.5, 3, 4 hours and on highlights and on an interview, and that's it. I don't see you limping to your car and driving home to care, that whole human aspect is not at all visible to everyone. You're just a gladiator that comes out on the field and fights for whatever it is, and then you kind of go away. You don't see them as, and again because you are, and again because of the way everything's being positioned, and you're on TV all the time, and you're being gushed over, and everyone's tweeting about you, and you're trending, and God knows what else. Right now, you appear to be elevated in a different rarefied air, when that's really what, as a person they're not, right? That whether you're, regardless of the level of the athlete, wherever you are, male or female, right, you are elevated, but then all of a sudden you have to go home. You go home and then you're just mom or dad, or a husband or a wife, and then all that stuff goes away. You still have to take out the garbage, you still have to make dinner, you still have to clean your bathroom, whatever else it is, right? And I think it's just like you said, that human aspect is lost on a lot of people, and I think that's why so many people can come down and criticize on someone who's so big, larger than life on all these screens and everywhere else. And
Literally,
yeah,
in the case of
exactly.
some of these guys.
And then they just, okay, that's why you can say you're not real, because I don't know you're not real because I don't know the real side of you. And so then that's how you just perceive it. It's like you're a movie, because then I go home and do my thing, and you're out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and I think that it's really cool and really inspiring to watch people recognize, like, in this moment, that maybe the normal ways in which we've done things, right?
Hmm.
That they know now that if, well, okay, there's also a part of me that thinks the opposite, right? Like, this
Go
is a
ahead.
extremely unique circumstance, right? Let's play this out, Jenna. Do you think that no coronavirus is
Go
around,
ahead.
right? uh Fans are in the stadium, like, like Milwaukee is playing at their arena. um you know like are the players walking off the court then knowing that there's 20,000 people in the audience already?
Hmm. That's the other interesting thing. I think it would have been just like everything else. I don't think they would have. I think they would have had their say. They would have tweeted it out, and they would have commented, and they would have been on done interviews and everything else. But you know, there's if there was no COVID-19 and everyone was in the stadiums, in the arena, in their seats, no, it would be as we were in January, right? People would still be talking about it. Unfortunately, people would still be dying due to, you know, violence. And so there would be still the similar ways of protest, but it wouldn't be anything as radical as we have now, only because we're in such a radical time, right? I don't think it would have had to have been a very serious. We would have had to, I think, been in a. I don't know if we would have gotten as much attention if COVID-19 wasn't going on.
Yeah, and the fanless aspect, I think, makes it easier for them to stomach. Because some players do see themselves as entertainers,
Hmm.
and some players do recognize the role that they play. And I'm glad that more and more of them are willing to take a step back and recognize that uh, that their humanity comes first, and are willing to do whatever they can for that. And we will see what transpires from this, especially once the NFL starts in a couple of weeks. Because that's the real litmus test, right?
Hmm.
Like, what's allowed and the ways in which players are able to express themselves in America's biggest sport, and a very strongly conservative culture. Like, the NBA does lean left,
Hmm.
politically. um and I'll be interested to see what happens. I know that Jerry Jones has been like, we'll try to come up with a compromise, and so that goes back to that, like, what is allowed as protest. If you have to get Jerry Jones's permission to do something, then they've taken, the juice out of it. And to some
Hmm.
degree, like, this is what happened this summer. Like, corporations that, like, there was that period of like a week and a half in which every company you've ever interacted with sent you an email or a press release or did a thing on Twitter to say how, like, down for the Black community that they are and the things that they have done. um, and it feels like a lot of the protest language and grievances are being co-opted so that it's like acceptable,
Hmm.
which is, like at Fortnite. Okay, Fortnite had like a Black Lives Matter like collaboration, I think, with like Killer Mike, right? And you know, there's a certain like absurdist element to that, I think, but
Right.
we'll see what's able to go forward from here, because it's evident that simply just having this campaign and the ways in which we've done that, um, more needs to be done, because people are still dying and we continue to have the same
Right.
conversations, and athletes continue to be looked for as like, the authorities on this
Hmm.
when they are also just human beings.
Right. They're just as they're just as upset and just as angry. But I think that's what the again, it comes back to someone's looking. People are looking for leadership and direction on this, and that's really why I think those athletes have to, because there really isn't. There's only so many that are have tried to speak up or step up or be that voice, and they're continually getting squashed or echo chambered, right, by whoever it is, right. And I think that's why people are looking to someone that have platforms like athletes, because they have those platforms that are not as easily broken down as, say, someone who's coming from the grassroots, right? There is really no, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. out there, as far as I know. I don't think there's someone like his counterpart, like Malcolm X, out there right now. And I think that's where a lot of people, like when you were back in the 60s, you had someone out there that was a unifying voice, right? Whichever side you want, whether you wanted to be a little bit more aggressive about it or more peaceful about it, at least there was someone out there like that. And I don't see someone that's a non athlete that's like that. And again, I may be wrong, but I think that's why people are looking to athletes that have that platform and have that base and can say that and talk to that. And I think that's what maybe that's what people are hungry for. It just seems like
I
there's a
think,
gap.
yeah, like, but the thing is, I mean, I feel like the athlete now is recognizing that they don't necessarily need to play sports to be noteworthy. Like,
Right.
I really strongly believe that, because this point was being made on social media yesterday, where some people are, mostly broadcasters, mostly people in the media, who are like, well, like a Darren Rovell, right? Like, basically being like, if the players abandon this, they have no opportunity. Like, hello, are you kidding me? Like, if LeBron James leaves the bubble, right? If we live in the universe in which he leaves the bubble, everybody is going to pay attention to that,
Of
right? Like,
course.
the media has to pivot to follow him, right? The
Absolutely.
more that he exists within the confines of the court and the game and the normalcy, right? Like, whatever gestures you want to do that exist within that space,
Hmm.
I strongly feel like are losing their effectiveness. And like, the athlete is now the platform, right? The
Right.
athlete is the brand. And, you know, all credit to LeBron, who this last season, or maybe it was two years ago already. Time has moved so weirdly in COVID.
Exactly.
But he like has started work, like actual substantive like work, political organization. I think he's partnered with the Dodgers to open Dodger Stadium as a
Mhm.
voting place this year. He obviously has his school in Akron, the
Which
K to
he
12
got
school.
all kinds of hell for, by the way. So,
Yeah. And then, like, I think more and more, like, he's also particularly special because he has more capital access
mhm.
to a lot of folks. I get that. But the more and more athletes recognize that they're also noteworthy as folks, and that they can capitalize it on their audience in a non-sports capacity, that's big, right? Like, guys reaching across lines. We saw this with our college athletes, right? Like, recognizing that, oh, we do have some power, and yes, it didn't end up going the way that they wanted,
Mhm.
but these are promising things because they have left behind uh, you know, like blueprints. They have
Right.
left behind like these conversations and these connections that can kind of, as you get a motorcycle driving by on your streets,
You like that?
it just I love these low budget like just homey feels. It's like what you can't quite anticipate. So the third point that I wanted to make though
Right.
is that from what and I'm somebody who pays attention to these activist communities a bit. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in them, but everybody that like right now, I think a lot of the work is at the grassroots level rather than any sort of like national unifying person.
Mhm.
Eh, and maybe that speaks to the nature of like social media discourse that has like made it much more difficult to have somebody who represents a massive amount of people without being picked apart. Because
Right.
an example of this is like DeRay McKesson,
Mhm.
uh blue jacket guy
Okay.
who you know is very well known, has a big following, but there's criticisms that have been lobbied at him, as somebody who represents Baltimore's like charter school movement and
Mm,
maybe isn't quite the right figure for the moment for everybody. Even
right.
though he has the ear of a lot of folks, he's not as progressive as some people want. Sean King, who is another guy that's in the spotlight, but is regularly criticized for like some shady business practices that he has.
Yep.
Uh, like I can't think of a solely unifying figure, and I might trace that back to the ways in which we talk about folk now
Mm,
and magnify a lot of the issues.
right.
But that's just my guess.
I think that's a very interesting point, right? Because I know that everyone, even when we look back, like even the people that were the leaders weren't necessarily perfect, but it just seems that I think, like you said, to this point now in this social media era, it's easier to criticize, break down, and sling and what's the word? Deunify, I guess, someone that is a potential leader. Not saying Sean King is one. I'm just saying that if there is someone out there,
Yeah.
they would almost have to completely be, and you can't, right? You can't even be completely off social media. And I guess that's why the athletes are the ones, right, that are looking towards because they're the only ones that have that platform, right? That can just start from a certain place instead of kind of creep up to that they're already there. So now we just go ahead and jump that and keep going higher and higher, which is again, it just seems that there isn't that one unifying voice out there that everyone's like, all right, let's rally behind it and go. It's like everyone is saying something. And it's interesting too, everyone is still, and if you looked at it at a high level, right? Everyone is probably saying the same thing, like everyone's going down the same highway, but there's some people that are going faster or some that are going slower. And so the message is kind of is not as unified, right? And so I guess that's probably what's harming us. I don't know. It's always a whole lot of I don't know.
I wonder if in the movement for civil rights, right, as we try to move towards a more just and a more fair world, that we move away from this model of like focusing on a sole like political face of the movement type leader.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wonder if we want to translate this back to sports parlance, right? Like that we don't build our team around one superstar. That we may feel a need in this moment to organize more and play winning team basketball, like a Detroit Pistons type of
Mm,
thing, like I would love to lump the Toronto Raptors into that, but Kawhi is also a quietly transcendent talent
right.
that just gets work done. But they like are as close to like that Pistons style of like just gritty, like get it done together, right? All the pieces just really
Right.
go well together, type of thing. Um, that's just I don't know. I think that maybe this like massive organizing work and continuing to show up and continuing to have the conversations with people who we can have them with. I think that there's still a substantial amount of folk that
Right.
aren't necessarily closed off to the possibility of police reform and like recognizing why all of this matters. I
Right.
think that there's a certain chunk of America that you will just have to drag along kicking and screaming,
Mhm.
which is traditionally what has always happened for any like social movement, right?
Right.
Like, but we've been able to do this with a lot of the national attitudes on marijuana,
Mhm.
and with gay marriage, and obviously with civil rights, and women getting the right to vote. And I know that two of those things are not necessarily to the same scale or the same like
Right.
gravity, but we have some historical precedent that you know you only need enough people.
Right. And that's interesting. I mean, there's always, even in the, yeah, you need to, there's need to be some sort of leader, but then they don't necessarily have to be the absolute vocal leader. But like you said, I think if we could change this by committee, I think it would be cool. I just don't know. It just, at times, it just feels so far, right? Because there are so many things going on that everyone's beginning to get unified, which is brilliant. I think that's a great thing, but I just don't know with everyone going through, what is a word? How do I put this? It's just everyone is wanting to go in the same direction. It's just we're all going in the same. It's like we're all trying to go to LA, but some people are going down the 101, some people are going down the 5, some people are going down the 99, right? Some
Hmm.
people are flying, right? We're all trying to get to the same destination. It's just we're not all together. And we have all the same desire and focus and dream and drive. It's just how are we all getting there in different ways? It's just I don't know. It just feels like the messaging is softened because there isn't all unified and everything else, but maybe time will tell that maybe this is like you said, this is where it's at and this is just laying that very solid foundation where we still need to go ahead and let a lot of the grassroots grow. So then this finally there is stuff coming out of the ground and making a change.
I, you know, as much as I hate to begrudgingly give credit to like the massive right wing element, like that is something that they've just generally been really good at. It's like uh regardless of whatever individual thoughts or feelings that there are, they'll always vote together. you
No
know
matter what.
and it's a really interesting time in America right now, like politically, just because I think this like left progressive faction and like this moderate faction that like have to lump themselves together,
Mhm.
right? Like that. But so this is like a conversation that I have with my girlfriend's
Okay.
like dad sometimes, who is kind of this more moderate Democrat, like
Okay.
would vote for Joe Biden like without hesitation because he wants things to go back to the way that they were. And at the same time, you have an evolving demographic of America. You have more
Mhm.
young people of color coming in. You
Right.
have more and more people who are recognizing that just going back to the old way is not enough. Going
Mm.
back to the old way just gets you back to the same types of people being mistreated, but it's friendly and with a smile on their face.
Right.
It's like uh, like this split has been described in the past of like there's a kind of an open hostility versus like a cold hostility,
Mm.
right? Like in the South, the kind of racism that you might experience is like open, versus in the North that's been described as like uh, it's more subtle, but it's still
Right.
there, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of black writers that have kind of detailed like that split, right?
Right.
And it's not enough for a growing segment of America to just continue to accept that that is going to be the way that this has to go.
Right.
You know, as Asians become more of a political like entity, certainly as Hispanic Latinx folks become more of an
Mhm.
entity, uh, we're at a really interesting place. I don't know. I'm certainly not an expert in this area, but I can feel a growing need for some sort of legitimate, like, third option, because there's nothing in the law that says that there can only be two.
Right.
And I wonder if the time is coming that there's going to be some sort of realignment as there was in the 60s. And I know in other countries there's certainly like a plethora of political options
Yeah.
that are all viable.
You always see like some of I was always fascinated by seeing some of like the French or elections or any other elections. You got 30 different parties in there. You're like, how the hell? How many do you have? But I mean, this way, at least you have that many options to choose from, right? And being able to do that and have that so many people. So having the two party is definitely, I'm definitely growing tired of it. Definitely not growing tired of the two party, but there's still a part of me that's grateful to be alive at this time because it's this has happened so many times before and it's actually turned out for the better. And I would like to think, I believe in my country that the US will be better at the end of all this, right? Maybe that's just the spring about, hope abounds eternal, maybe, but I would just like to think that we're going to come out of this better. Just there's it just we have to. I don't think we, and again, if we didn't, then I guess I would be something a hell of a lot more serious and a lot more detrimental if we didn't. I think that would be harmful to our legacy as where we're already at right now.
Um, I'm right there with you. Like, I hope that something good comes out of this.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember how I felt in 2016, right? Like, I was by myself in a one-bedroom apartment in Los Feliz. When it became apparent that things were not going to go the way that we wanted, I crawled into bed and I turned out the lights, and I just prayed that it was a bad dream. And then I woke up in the morning and I went to work,
Right.
and I teach in a 98% Hispanic Latinx community. Um, and we sat and we write and we talked. Well, we wrote. I guess
Mm-hmm.
it's a really bad look for an English teacher to screw up the verb conjugation there. We wrote and we talked, and there. I remember feeling that day that something had been violated in the trust that I had put in this
Mm,
country. I had always grown up with kind of an acute awareness that it was not a perfect place,
right.
but just what we were willing to revert ourselves to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also really thankful for the opportunity to come on the pod and like just think about some of this stuff out loud, because in a lot of my speaking spaces I'm not really free to think politically.
Mm,
Like, I have my classroom in which I'm very like hands off about that,
right.
like try to decide what you want, I'm just giving you information.
Mm-hmm.
And my own like Cal Sports podcast, like, we're already kind of liberal leaning, so and like I
Yeah.
kind of so I enjoy being able to have these conversations with you, and I just like, I want to believe that we're better,
Right.
and I am setting the bar extremely low, so that I can be surprised.
Right. And I think that's fair, right? Because you want to think the term that I've been struggling using, and because again, the way it's being thrown around right now is the whole thing of American exceptionalism. And I do believe that we did have it at one time. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe we still have it. I'm not exactly sure in what form it is, but we were always looked upon from the world that we're extremely generous, that we're extremely engaging. Yes, we weren't we would throw our weight around, but still people were understanding like, look, if it came down to it, the US would help us, right, in some form or another. And maybe that's where the exceptionalism came from. But it just like you said, I think we have to set the bar low because there is a lot of that trust and a lot of that tarnish and a lot of that we still need to unfortunately earn back. At least maybe it just feels that way. Maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But it just feels that we have to earn a lot of that back because now, you know, I'm confident we can. I just, again, it just seems so far away.
Especially with COVID, like warping like our sense of time, right? Like we
Yeah.
are a little under 70 days from the election,
68.
and and yet, it seems like just yesterday was like March 16th, and we're
Hmm.
going into lockdown, and
Right.
5 months have just gone like this, and I don't, I don't know. I think geopolitically, right? Like all empires, have always
Hmm.
declined, right? There was a time in which England was the center of the world, and
They were.
I will still feel fortunate to live here in some ways. If this is not, if we're no longer number one in the world hierarchy, that's not totally necessary for me and my identity.
Right.
Because a lot of what I enjoy as an American is the ability to just have certain like ways of life that
Hmm.
are good for me. And I went to Vietnam in January. A country with
Okay.
a very different like lifestyle that is approaching modernity. There's
Okay.
parts of it that from when I had gone there as a kid, have advanced significantly. You'll see American chains there. You'll see
Mm,
like really high end Western brands like
right.
set up shop there now. Um, but there are still distinctly rural and underdeveloped regions like in Vietnam
Right.
where, it's not no showers. There's like, you take a bath in the same area as you're doing your business.
I did have a question though. Did they
Yes.
have cell coverage though?
They do have
See?
like it's a mostly mobile like country.
Right.
A lot of free Wi-Fi everywhere, actually.
Yeah.
Significant amounts more than America.
Absolutely.
And my point with that is like, you know, people. I think it's a universal thing that people will try to
Hmm.
be happy,
Right.
and that'll take different forms depending on where you are, and that it's possible.
Hmm.
Uh, and I guess that's a long roundabout way of saying is like what I enjoy about America is that I have a space where I can pursue being happy with what I think like is best for me.
Hmm.
And I've never been one of those rah rah like America is the best like people, because that's kind of like not crucial to me. I'm
Right.
not so worried about regaining our world standing in this election as much as I am making sure that the citizens of this country like are safe and
Hmm.
able to live to what I think every human being's entitled to.
Right. And that's fair. I think that's a good first step, right? And that's going to be very curious because having grown up in the 80s and through the end and through the part of and the end of the Cold War, right? And everything else, just I'm very curious to see because again, there are still very some pockets out there now that are younger than me that still say America is number one. Rah rah. There's no one, no one else in the world can beat us. But once China overtakes us from an economic perspective, what's that going to do to some people? Like to you, and it was beautifully said. That doesn't govern your psyche, right? As long as you're able to have a country in which you're able to live and do what you have and your comforts and goods and continue on, you're fine, right? And even then, I believe that's the way the British Empire, even though it isn't the British Empire, they still have the same way of life. They're able to continue and they've been doing that, right? And I think that's something, but again, I'm curious to see how that would impact some people's psyche that, wow, we're no longer number one, right? What would that do to them? That'd be an interesting use case to see what that would happen to those people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like I've seen studies like in education where we ranked like they did a global test of like kids' math and writing and
Hmm.
literacy abilities, and I believe America ranked something like 43rd out of 50,
Mm.
but they ranked number one for thinking that they did the best.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So it's
Yeah.
hardwired deep, and I am fascinated to see what that means, and I think it'll impact certainly uh more like if I had to make a prediction, I think it will take a larger toll on the conservative type of folk
Mm,
because uh like what I associate that with, right? Like this attitude of like
right.
we're the best is also, if I had to like draw a Venn diagram, is I wouldn't say a perfect circle, but I would say a strong overlap
Mhm.
with white supremacists. Like
Mm,
we're the legacy of the world. We are like the pinnacle of civilization type viewpoint. And I don't know. I'd based on the way things are going, I would think that they are going to react in some sort of mm, like there'll be a big push for like militaristic action,
mm.
but there's not been a modern war like fought be like a real like full on engagement between world
A
powers
world
since the
war.
nuclear age. Yeah.
A world war, exactly. There hasn't been.
uh, and now that like each country's nuclear stockpile is more than sufficient to nuke the earth like thousands of times over.
Right.
um
And that was after reduction, which
yeah,
is crazy.
I that got dark real quick, Jedi. Like, I think at the end of the day, like we're rounding out the hour, and I don't want to make anybody lose hope, which is what I would tell my students. Right? It's
What would you tell your students? Because again, I think that you've kind of seen that from my tweets as well. It's not that I'm
yeah.
losing hope. I'm just so damn tired. Right? I'm so tired of and I think and I'm throwing my opinion out there. Because I'm throwing my opinion out there, people are challenging me, which I like. Right? I'm not as fast on my toes as I wish I was. I have to think about my responses so I can be make some sense of it. But the point is that what would you tell your students or just people that you meet that are tired or are losing hope? How would you, is it just this too shall pass, or is there something a little bit more than that?
I think I would tell them two things, and one part of it is going to seem like I am doing like the motivational like Hollywood teacher thing,
Yeah.
but the first thing that because like I get anxiety about this. We've talked about in some of our pre-show like stuff over the last few weeks. Is on one level, I would feel like you know at least what we are facing right
Hmm.
now existentially is not a tangible like danger that literally is my parents came from a war zone, and they
Right.
lived through that, and close enough where armies like were shooting each other like right by their houses. And I would still feel thankful that no country has ever invaded America, and that our
Right.
problems are internally, and that brings about the possibility of resolving them
Hmm.
bloodlessly. And if not that, then at least the fact that our life is still relatively not great, but it sure beats living in the Middle Ages,
Right.
like when both you and I would be dead by now. Just like because there's no modern medicine, and a lot of these things that we take for like the pace of the modern life here
Right.
in America is with many privileges that I think we should remember. And then the thing that I would tell my students particularly um, is everybody who has believed in making this country a better place
Right.
has been willing to die before they saw the end of the fruits of their labor, you know and they have to commit themselves to that, knowing that they might not see success.
Hmm.
And in this life you only get to decide, you only get the time that you decide to spend and how you chose to live it.
Right.
There are some things that are going to be outside of your control, and honestly, like if and that's something that for me, like I do the best that I can to help leave this world a better place. I try to leave an impact in the students that I teach, and hopefully they go on to to I was literally telling them this to I was literally telling them this today, where if all I do is teach you guys and you don't teach anybody else, then I failed.
Mm, okay.
You know, each
Absolutely.
one teach one, right?
Right.
And so I think if you're losing hope, you have to understand that all you get is the chance to do your best.
Right.
And you have, like, if you believe in what is right and making things better for your fellow man here, you have to spend your life in service of that
Right.
and be willing to recognize that at the end of that life, whether that is 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, um, that's all you have. And somebody is going to carry that baton after you.
And making
I
them
don't know.
and
I don't
making
know
that
how
per
I did with that.
and I think like you said, and then I think it's and leaving them in the best position to grab that baton, right? Because I've run a few relays, and if you have a crappy handoff, you mess up the whole damn thing. And so, like you said, doing your best to make sure that that whoever is coming behind you is set up for success, right? And doing that, I agree. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair statement to Beaks. You said, as long as we're doing the best, our best, I think that's all we can ask for, especially right now. It just at times it seems right now. I maybe today I was a little bit heavier on reading on a lot of stuff that wasn't good for me. And so
Mhm.
maybe I think that's what it might have been. So that's really what I was doing. It really, today wasn't filled with study like I have been most of the week. Today was a little bit more paying attention to a lot of other stuff. And I probably should have just stuck to studying because I think that would have been better for me. So, but I
Hey,
think that's cool. But I think
I
I
saw
just,
on Twitter once
yeah,
somebody's, sometimes people like retweet things that other people's therapists have said. So it's like free therapy, right? Like, so this is trickling down like
right.
by way of retweet. But I saw something that really resonated with me once. Is like, our minds really weren't meant to process human suffering on such a scale, right?
Oh,
Like, people
absolutely.
in the olden days, like, only really had to worry about what was directly in front of them. And
Their
it is
family or even
okay.
their hamlet, right? That's all you
Yeah,
had to worry about. You didn't have to worry about the whole country. It was like, this is my hamlet and this is what I'm worried about.
yeah.
That's fair.
And I know that that world is no longer possible, at least here in America. It's very hard to just pretend and shut yourself off to everything unless
Right.
you're a person with certain means. But it's okay to disconnect, I think, every once in a while,
Right. And I think
and
the other
remember that.
and that's the other thing too. I think this is a good exercise for me because if it was any other regular time, we would be talking about kickoff. We'd be talking about the week 0 games,
Yeah.
right? That are coming up that we're supposed to start, I guess, tomorrow. They were supposed to start tomorrow, right? And so there's a lot of other things. So I think it's the one way I'm looking at it is that it's forcing me to grow and think about other things because college football has been my passion
Mhm.
forever. And so it's really forcing me into a spot where I have to think about other things and enjoy or think about enjoying other things. So I think that's kind of the spin I need to. I just need to find what that is because I've been chomping at the political bit a little too much, and I think I just need to cut it out just for my own mental, if you will.
I mean, on the flip side of that, you no longer have to worry about the too deep or like what's going on ahead. And like, we can measure time differently this fall.
Right.
And I think as we get ready to wrap this up, and bring it back to the
Hmm.
beginning, like, for the athletes who have recognized these things, right? Like, I think they are doing what I hope that I'm able to do, is like, they recognize, hey, I have more power and more opportunities outside of just sport to try to pass this baton on to somebody else. And
Right.
we've seen some impact of that already, where the Ravens, a team that's not even connected directly to the NBA,
Right.
like, puts out a series of concrete demands and proposals that you know are able to change some of the consciousness around
Hmm.
this, where people, like, can't just be like, well, what do you want? I'm like, hello, here are these
Right.
like specific things. And um makes it a lot harder to deny the legitimacy
Hmm.
of these demands and beliefs if you have stuff like that.
Right.
So fingers crossed for whatever happens going forward, and to keep fighting the good fight.
Exactly. And I think that's the key, right? I think I just need to go to sleep and keep and come up, wake up tomorrow and ready to, again, like you said, fight the good fight, but in whatever way I'm supposed to. So don't give up. That's the other thing. As long as I don't give up, then I'm already ahead of the game. So that is the key. But yeah, but I'm glad. I'm glad we got to. Like I said, I appreciate being able to have this face to face interaction because it is. It's more than just bouncing ideas off of Twitter. It's being able
Mhm.
to share ideas and talk and hear each other's voice and being able to go through that. So it was definitely therapeutic for me as well.
All right.
Well, I appreciate you. Everyone else, thank you again. Hopefully, this one was made sense for you. We're gonna try to, you know, make do something. You have another week to either watch Star Wars or The Matrix. You decide, and then we'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
I mean, it's my birthday this weekend, so I'll definitely make some time for myself to do something, and I'll report back. Listeners, it seems like Jedi and I we have like a loosely, I would describe it as like a loose standing invitation, like every week.
Yep.
At some point he may just be like, "Hey, can we step down and like have somebody else with the Thursday slot?" But as long as he wants me here, I'll be here, talking about whatever. Eventually, we joked about forming a five timers club. I'm at three right now,
You are at
so
3. So in 2 weeks then.
yeah.
In 2 weeks, then I'll have a jacket. Well, I won't have a jacket. I'll draw a jacket for you.
Yeah, draw a jacket, just Photoshop it onto the photo that you used for me for press,
Exactly.
and
Little
and
5.
that'll be
It
perfect.
won't
That'll
even
be
be a
perfect.
5, it'll be a V. I won't do the hand
That's
gesture because that's for the other school.
uh well, I knew that. Wait, is it
Yeah.
like literally just like this?
No, it's the fight on V. I was
Oh,
gonna do that.
I
Yeah.
see, I see. Okay. All right.
No, the other school is it's so these 3 fingers
Mm,
shape a W
yeah.
and these 2 fingers curl in to make a C.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's
I
theirs.
see. I'm
So it
not
is
gonna make
kind
you
of a
do that
club.
on the air.
I actually
Okay.
kinda just did it over here. It was kind of awkward and I'm like, I it
Mm.
was close enough. But anyway. But yes. But anyway, good night, my friend. Have an excellent weekend. Happy birthday. It's Saturday, right? Is that what you said?
My birthday is Monday, but like since it's Monday, I can't really do that much. So this weekend is shenanigans. I might open up a stream and just have people drop by and say hi to the various parts of my life. Who knows?
Announce it.
I've Yeah.
Announce
We'll
it.
see what
Make me aware.
happens.
Tag me so I can catch up because I am all over the place this weekend. So
Yeah.
hopefully I'll be able to make some time and join. So
Yeah.
we will do that.
That would be awesome, Jedi.
I would love to. So thanks again. Thank you everyone for joining. I know it was a good one. I enjoyed it. It was therapeutic for me. So again, I appreciate you making time for me and we will hype it for next week and make something happen. So again, Nam, thank you. Thank you for everything. And then you have a great weekend. And thank you everyone. And we'll talk soon. Oh, anything you want to promote other than the stream or your birthday?
No,
Awesome.
I'm good, guys. Thanks for continuing to listen to me do my drivel.
Our drivel.
Yes.
Sounds good.
I sometimes feel selfish when I'm on here. So, but that like I enjoy the back and forth for the both of us. So
No, it is a good back and forth, and I appreciate it. And everyone, thanks again. And then, yes, tomorrow we have Paul Hornstein on the 42 Social Club, and we're going to be talking about a lot of hockey. So that'll be good. And he's actually an alum from the 80s, so we get to hear some horror stories about that 9-game losing streak to the other school as well. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Nem. Hang on to the Zoom call, and then we will talk in a
yeah,
bit. So good night, everyone. Love you, love yourself, love those around you, and always make sure to stay social.